The neon sign outside the diner flickered, buzzing against the quiet of the small-town night. Inside, the smell of fresh coffee and fried food lingered, mixed with the sound of clinking plates and the faint hum of an old jukebox. It was past midnight, and most of the world outside was asleep, but not Emily. Emily moved quickly between tables, balancing plates in her hands with the ease of someone who'd been doing this far too long. Her ponytail swung as she leaned down with a warm smile, refilling coffee cups and checking in on tired truck drivers and lonely travelers. To her customers, she was cheerful, attentive, and full of life. But beneath her smile lay exhaustion, the kind that seeps into your bones. Her shoes had holes in the soles, the thin fabric rubbing blisters on her feet. The pay she earned barely stretched far enough to cover rent, groceries, and the endless stack of bills waiting at home. Still, Emily never let her weariness show. She believed kindness cost nothing, and even on her hardest nights, she made sure no one left the diner without feeling cared for. As she cleared a table near the counter, her eyes caught the old tip jar. A coworker, Maria, had been struggling more than usual. Her husband had just lost his job, and she was worried about feeding her kids. Emily reached into her pocket, pulled out her very last dollar, and quietly slipped it inside the jar. She could have kept it, used it to buy herself a bus ride home or a loaf of bread for tomorrow, but she chose to give it away. No one noticed. She didn't expect them to. That was Emily, always giving more than she had. Or so she thought. In the corner booth by the window sat a man in a simple gray hoodie. He looked unremarkable, almost invisible, blending into the shadows of the late-night diner. He sipped his coffee slowly, his eyes following Emily as she worked. He saw the tired slump in her shoulders when she thought no one was watching, the quiet sacrifice of that last dollar, the way she kept her spirit bright even when the world gave her little reason to. Emily had no idea her small act of kindness had been witnessed. No idea that the man watching her would soon change her life forever. The diner's door chimed softly as another late-night customer stepped inside, a middle-aged man in a worn jacket, his face tired and weathered from a long journey. He slid into a booth near the back, clutching a folded newspaper under his arm. Emily greeted him with her usual brightness, though her voice carried the faint rasp of exhaustion. "What can I get for you tonight?" she asked gently. The man hesitated, his eyes dropping to the menu he couldn't seem to focus on. Just coffee," he muttered, avoiding her gaze. Emily's instincts told her something was off. She'd seen that look before, the kind of quiet shame people carried when life had pressed them too far. She leaned a little closer, her smile softening. "Haven't eaten yet? The meatloaf's fresh tonight. It's my favorite." His hands tightened around the edges of the menu. He gave a faint shake of his head. "No, just coffee. That's all I can afford right now." The words hit Emily harder than she expected. She knew the sting of empty pockets all too well. For a moment, she thought of her own fridge at home, nearly empty, and the rent notice she'd tucked behind a stack of unpaid bills. Still, her heart wouldn't let her walk away. Without another word, she scribbled the order for meatloaf and mashed potatoes on her pad and slipped it to the cook. Minutes later, she placed the steaming plate in front of the man. He blinked, startled. I didn't order this," he stammered. "It's on the house," Emily said, her smile steady but her voice soft, almost conspiratorial. "Everyone deserves a warm meal." For a second, the man's eyes glistened, and his shoulders relaxed. He picked up the fork slowly, as though savoring not just the food but the kindness behind it. Across the diner, in the shadowed corner, the man in the hoodie watched closely. He saw the way Emily gave without hesitation, even when she had so little herself. He noticed how she didn't announce her kindness to anyone, didn't look around to see who might be watching, she simply gave because she believed it was right. Emily moved on to her next table, humming softly under her breath, unaware that her smallest act of compassion had struck something deep in the quiet observer's heart. The clock above the counter ticked past 2 a.m., and the diner had grown quiet. Most of the booths sat empty now, save for the man in the gray hoodie still tucked into the corner. Emily wiped down the counter, her motions slow, fatigue pulling at her arms. She stifled a yawn as she stacked clean mugs, glancing at the few bills in her apron pocket, barely enough to get her through tomorrow. The man in the hoodie hadn't moved for nearly an hour, sipping his coffee in silence. Finally, as Emily walked past his booth with a damp rag, he spoke. "You're a kind person," he said softly. Emily paused, surprised. She blinked at him, then smiled politely. "Just doing my job." He shook his head. "No. I saw what you did. The dollar in the jar. The meal you gave that man." His voice carried no judgment, only quiet sincerity. For a moment, Emily froze. She wasn't used to being noticed. Her kindness usually went unseen, tucked away in the small gestures she gave to others. She felt her cheeks flush. "It wasn't much," she murmured, shrugging. "I just try to do what's right." The man studied her carefully, then reached into his pocket. He pulled out a sleek black card, setting it on the table along with the check. Emily's eyes flickered down, and her breath caught. The name on the card was one she'd seen in news articles, on magazine covers, and whispered in conversations about unimaginable wealth. He was a billionaire philanthropist, known for building companies and funding charities across the world. Her rag slipped from her hand and landed on the floor. You're, she stammered. He offered a small, knowing smile. "Just someone who believes people like you make this world worth living in." Emily shook her head, at a loss for words. She felt her chest tighten. Was this really happening? This ordinary night, her quiet sacrifices, and now this man, seeing her, really seeing her. As she gathered herself, the diner around her seemed to fade, leaving only the weight of his words and the sudden realization that her life was no longer on the same path it had been just hours ago. She had no idea, but the true gift was still to come. Emily's hands trembled as she gathered the man's empty coffee cup. The name on that black card still echoed in her mind. She couldn't quite believe it. Her heart raced, not from excitement but from the surreal weight of the moment. She glanced around the diner, half expecting cameras, or a hidden trick. But it was just the two of them, the hum of the coffee machine filling the silence. The man leaned forward, resting his arms on the table. His eyes, calm but intense, held hers. "You remind me of myself," he said quietly. "I grew up with nothing. Worked nights like this. Wore shoes with holes. I know what it means to choose between eating or paying rent." Emily's throat tightened. No one had ever spoken to her struggles so plainly, so truthfully. He reached into his jacket, sliding a folded envelope across the table. "Inside is a scholarship fund. Enough to cover tuition, books, living expenses. You once told a coworker you dreamed of becoming a nurse." Emily's eyes widened. She hadn't realized anyone had overheard that private conversation weeks ago. The man smiled faintly. "I believe the world needs more people like you in hospitals, caring for strangers the way you cared for that man tonight." Her fingers hovered over the envelope, afraid to touch it, as if it might vanish the moment she reached out. This can't be real," she whispered, tears pooling in her eyes. "It's very real," he assured her. "And it's not just for you." He pulled out a second check, placing it on the counter where the staff usually split tips. "This is for your team, for Maria, for the others. No one should feel invisible when they're giving so much of themselves every day." Emily covered her mouth with her hand, tears spilling freely now. Her chest ached with gratitude and disbelief. She had lived so long giving without expecting anything in return, and suddenly, someone was giving back in a way she could barely comprehend. "Why me?" she asked, her voice trembling. The billionaire leaned back, his answer simple but powerful. "Because kindness is the only investment that never fails. And you've been investing all along." Emily wept openly, her life forever altered in that single moment of compassion. The morning sun spilled through Emily's tiny apartment window, painting the walls gold. For the first time in years, she woke up without the heavy weight of worry pressing down on her chest. On the table beside her sat the envelope, the scholarship that promised a future she had almost stopped believing in. Weeks had passed since that unforgettable night in the diner. Emily still worked a few shifts, not out of necessity but out of loyalty to her coworkers. Maria, the single mother, had cried when she learned of the check left for the staff. Bills had been paid, groceries had filled cupboards, and hope, something they'd all been running low on, suddenly felt abundant. But today was different. Today, Emily wasn't pulling on her old waitress uniform. Instead, she buttoned up a crisp white shirt, smoothed her hair, and picked up a brand new backpack. Her hands trembled slightly, not from fatigue this time, but from excitement. She was walking into her first day of nursing school. As she stood before the mirror, she remembered his words, "Kindness is the only investment that never fails." She repeated them softly, letting them root themselves in her heart. The billionaire hadn't asked for recognition. He hadn't returned for thanks. He had simply given, trusting Emily to carry forward the same spirit he had seen in her. And she promised herself she would. When she entered the classroom, rows of students buzzed with nervous energy. Emily found her seat near the back, her heart swelling with pride and disbelief. She wasn't just there for herself, she was there for every customer she had served, every night she had gone hungry, every person who had once felt unseen. Her journey was no longer about surviving. It was about healing, about serving, about proving that even the smallest acts of kindness can ripple into miracles. That night, as she scribbled notes under the fluorescent classroom lights, Emily smiled to herself. She knew she would carry the story of that diner forever, not as a tale of luck, but as proof of something greater. Because sometimes, when you least expect it, the world is watching. And when it is, kindness has the power to change everything.